Hello and welcome to RC Truth Media. Today I'll be talking about the purchasing power of the US dollar. Now, what's going on with the dollar and how come every time you click on the news you hear something about emerging markets, markets are going up, markets are going down, always talking about the stock market, economy is always on the watch, economy alert, 1 minute everything's fine, the other minute everything's horrible. Well, let's talk about the dollar first of all. The purchasing power has been going down ever since the Federal Reserve has been created, and that is because we are no longer attached to anything, any assets. The dollar is a fiat system, which means we are only backed, the dollar is only backed by the faith of those using it. It used to be backed by gold or silver. Matter of fact, in the Constitution it says that money shall not be anything but gold or silver. And a lot of people believe that it should still be this way. And I'm actually one of those. Because every fiat system has failed. And since we are the world reserve currency system of the world, which means if any country wants to trade their goods, they have to exchange first their currency into dollars to do business with us. Now, this is becoming a problem all over the world increasingly because the value of our dollar is getting less and less. And in order to do business with us, it's been costing these countries more and more. And we'll be discussing a couple of articles now. So the first article comes from mybudget360.com, and it says comparing the inflated cost of living today from 1938 to 2013. How the US dollar has lost incredible purchasing power since then. Money is only as useful as to what it can buy. The Fed has created a system where debt is now equal to money. This is why big purchases like cars, houses, and even going to college are only feasible by mortgaging your future for many decades. Since the payments are broken down into tiny monthly installments, many people pay little attention to the true cost of things over their life. Yet over this time, the US dollar has lost a tremendous amount of purchasing power due to inflation. Inflation slowly eats away at your purchasing power, yet having access to debt has given the middle class the false impression that they're still protected from the unraveling impacts of inflation. Someone sent a photo from Reddit that shows the cost of living for people back in 1938. You would think that people in 2013 would have more purchasing power than those living through the Great Depression, but this is wrong. Adjusting for inflation, you'd be surprised what has happened in the last 75 years. A new house back then was $3,900. An average income back then was $1,700 a year. So, yeah, they'd make a lot less money, and everything was a lot less. So people say, yeah, so what? Everything was a lot less back then, but they also made a lot less too, right? Wrong. We're going to talk about that right now. Okay, so you can normalize costs over time through adjusting for inflation. Back in 1938, a new home cost about 2 times the annual average income. A new car was only about 1/3 the cost of the annual average income. These figures are important because back in 1938, using credit was only a small factor in purchasing goods. The middle class didn't start blossoming until after World War II. That's when full credit went in, and we became a fiat system after World War II. So you would expect that things were still tough for regular households. What we find though is that compared to this typical income, buying a new home or buying a car was relatively double for most households. Now adjusting all these figures for inflation shows how much more expensive things have become and how dependent we now are to financing purchases with debt created by the banking system. Right here it says, this chart shows the impact of inflation and the declining purchasing power of the dollar. For example, a new home adjusting for inflation should cost around $64,597 a year, but the current cost of a new home is $245,800 a year. The average income has stayed about the same, normalizing for inflation, A new home today costs nearly 10 times the annual average income of a worker. So it used to cost around twice the amount of an annual income for a worker. Today it's around 10 times the amount. The two income trap has largely hidden this inflation, since it now takes two households to accomplish what one income was able to do 75 years ago. So, exactly. This is exactly why one parent could stay home 50 years ago and be perfectly fine. The mom could stay home all day and take care of the kids, while the dad could go out and work, and he could afford all the bills and everything. Um, what society did was they said women need rights, women need rights. Well, at the same time, when women were starting to be able to work, they were lowering the purchasing power of our dollar, which actually made these women have to work. So they made it a social thing. They, meaning the powers that be, acted like women need to work. They made movements all throughout America, the equality movements, but at the same time, they were devouring our money, the purchasing power of the dollar. So you can see what has happened here. All right. So if we go down, it basically shows the same thing as my background there, that the dollar has gone absolutely nowhere. I do want to show you guys another um, article here. This one's from out. This one right here, central banker observes sudden evaporation of dollar funding, warns of global turmoil. Last October, just as the Fed started shrinking its balance sheet, we published yet another article on what is arguably the biggest threat to not only risk assets but also the global economy: the dollar funding shortage. It never went away, and it's starting to get worse again. While hardly a novel problem, we first discussed the return of the dollar funding shortage in March 2015. The fact that global stocks kept rising and that the overall funding conditions remained relatively loose, keeping the global economy well lubricated, prevented the dollar funding shortage from becoming a major concern to policymakers, despite occasional recent hiccups such as the labor OIS spread blowout, which both we and Citi explained as a symptom of the creeping shortage of the world's reserve currency. There's a shortage in the world reserve currency system. That's what they're saying. And this is going on all over the world. That's because for 10 years when Obama was in office, rates were 0%. You could They could borrow money and pay it back at the same amount they got it for. Therefore, lending was getting crazy, borrowing was getting crazy. Our public debt went from 10 trillion to 20 trillion dollars. Also devaluing the money, because as the printing presses go on, that's inflation, and inflation is um, is a consequence of printing. It also says right here, the more gradual sell-off observed in places like Indonesia, Malaysia, Brazil, Mexico, and India. Don't blame the Fed's rate hike cycle. Instead, blame the double whammy of the Fed's shrinking balance sheet coupled with the dollar-draining surge in debt issuance by the U.S. Treasury. That's the message from the current Reserve Bank of India, who writes that unlike previous turbulence, this episode cannot be attributed to the U.S. Federal Reserve's moves on interest rates, which have been rising steadily since December 16, in a calibrated manner. But does that mean that the Fed is not to blame for what increasingly looks like another budding EM crisis? Not at all. According to Patel, the dollar funding shortage upheaval stems from what he sees as the confluence of two significant events. He's saying it's from the increase in U.S. Treasury to pay for tax cuts, and also the Fed reducing their balance sheet. Well, we see all the other countries that do not have good credit ratings going down first, like India, Mexico, Brazil, Malaysia, Indonesia. This is going to be the domino effect as the U.S. is becoming decreasingly in our purchasing power. As our purchasing power gets lower and lower, and as it's increasingly more, as they increase the interest rates to borrow, what's going to happen is you're going to see these countries that have low credit ratings their economies falling and collapsing, and their currencies collapsing, such as Brazil, Venezuela, Mexico, a lot of countries. Any country that goes against using the dollar as their reserve currency system will be taken out first, and their currency will be devalued first, such as a lot of the countries in the Middle East. Um, you're seeing this all over the world. The United States will be the last one to fall because we still have the world reserve currency right now. But China is right there in the background to pick up the pieces. They've been saving their gold in the gold China exchange or Shanghai Gold Exchange since the 1980s. They're ready. They are ready to take over right now. So thanks a lot for coming to my channel. Please like and subscribe. You could donate at PayPal. I'll leave a link below. You could also donate in my Bitcoin wallet. I'll also leave my Bitcoin address below. I'll be showing some more videos about what's going on with the dollar and the economy in the next few days. Thanks a lot and have a great day.